Boys, let's move to Purdue. As we mentioned, they're traveling to Champaign for the big showdown against Illinois. But tonight, Purdue, a 92-65 victory. They were 20.5-point favorites over at Bet Rivers, and they took care of business. They just did what they do when Purdue fires on all cylinders. Zach Edey, 22 points, 9 rebounds. Jaden Ivey, 17 points, 5 and 4. Travion Williams, a quiet 10 and 5 off the bench tonight, but they didn't need it. And the scary thing is, they shot 31% from three in this blowout. I mean, this was just utter domination against a Nebraska team who, if we're being honest, might not win a Big Ten game this entire season, but that didn't take away from how impressed I was with Purdue tonight. Carter, what was your takeaway on the Boilermakers?
Yeah, I mean, I was impressed by Purdue just from a pure talent standpoint. Like, just watching those guys, like I said, you have Travion Williams, Jaden Ivey. I mean, they just have so many weapons that they can send at you. But you know, it was a 30-point win. It was a blowout win, but also at the same time, I thought Nebraska was getting like some pretty good shots, some pretty good looks. They were dropping a lot of pick and roll drop-offs from Alonzo Verge. You know, it's a win. It was a 30-point win. It was a dominant win. But at the same time, those defensive questions still pop up with me with Purdue. And when they have to go up against an efficient and a well-oiled, well-run offense, what are they going to do? But, you know, at the end of the day, the talent just kind of the cream rose to the top with this Purdue team. So, you know, good win for them. But I still think they have some things to work on defensively.
I think they have a lot of things to work on. I mean, you mentioned defensively. Can we talk about the point guard spot for this Purdue team? Because when I watch this team, they just remind me of teams in the past. I don't want to use any term that's going to bite me here that Carter and I are prone to use on teams we don't like. But Purdue reminds me of teams in the past who assert their dominance against teams that just don't have enough to match up. And that's what I saw tonight in past games. I mean, against high majors this year, they blew out Butler. They blew out Florida State, who has some size inside, but we've kind of seen what Florida State is at this point. But Purdue tonight, this is their 5th Big Ten game. This is the first time they've covered the spread in 5 games in Big Ten play, even against not top tier Big Ten opponents. So I know they're talented. I know they're extremely big. They're strong, all that. But I'm curious if these puzzle pieces fit, or if there's just not maybe the emotional, I don't know, toughness might be the word, but like, I want to see them do this to a great team that I really respect and think is tough. And honestly, like, if it can't go through the post, I'm not sure I trust what they have in the backcourt to get that done. What's your take on their backcourt, Sweeney?
I don't trust them in the half court. I think that's a key distinction. I think Purdue has been at its best all season long when they've been able to push the pace a little bit, which feels odd, right? Because you're sitting there, you're like, okay, this is a team that relies on, you know, getting post touches, and like, that's absolutely true. But I think their offense goes to another gear when they can kind of hunt threes in transition. And I think you've seen some of the games where they've struggled a little bit more. Teams have been able to keep the score down and keep the pace under control. Wisconsin sucked the life out of that game a couple of weeks ago when they were that was like 10 days ago. That feels like a year. I mean, but literally, like, you know, they sucked the life out of that game. They made it play entirely in the half court. They really took Jaden Ivey out of it for long stretches and said, all right, if you're going to beat us by playing through the post every possession, play for the post every possession. That's okay. Right. They didn't give up those huge threes and transition. And the moment where Purdue was able to build some separation and really dominate that game was when they got some open looks in semi-transition, when Ivy could get ahead of steam. And I thought Penn State actually did a very good job of executing a similar game plan and hanging in the fight. And again, it helped, obviously, that, you know, Jalen Pickett hit some really tough shots, and, you know, Greg Lee made some big plays, and, you know, like the Penn State played very well. But at the same time, Purdue's offense almost has to be God tier for them to be as good as they need to be, because their defense just has some problems. Like, personnel wise, I don't think the personnel is great to be elite on defense, right? Thompson's very small. You know, Stefanovic is a solid defender. He's an elite defender. You know, Edey has his issues in space, and teams have been able to exploit that. I think, as you've seen, I certainly thought Villanova did a great job with that. I think there's other games where they've been able to exploit the defensive woes for Purdue. First has his issues as a freshman. Like, they have enough defensive flaws where they just have to dominate an offense. And I think when they haven't been a complete inferno, you've been able to beat them. They've been beatable. And I think that all starts with keeping them out of transition.
And that's what scares me for March with Purdue, because all it takes is a coach and a good team to exploit those weaknesses. That's what happens in March. You run up to matchups, you run up to good coaching, and they're able to exploit those things that you don't do well. So it's something that, they might be able to get away with some games in the Big Ten with that, and some games, moving forward. But once March hits and you run into a different crop of coaches, different crop of teams, they can game plan for that type of thing. And they know those weaknesses, and they will expose them. So, God tier offenses are going to get it done.
Sweeney, you mentioned that Wisconsin-Purdue game was 10 days ago. It felt like a year. Just so you know, in Big Ten days, that to translating to ACC years, 10 days is actually 2 years. So that's probably why it feels a little weird. Look, I have two issues with Purdue that I think are going to end up preventing me personally from buying into this team come March, or backing this team, or putting any of my money over at Bet Rivers on this team to win the NCAA tournament. One, as I mentioned, the backcourt, I just got to see some trust from Matt Painter to Jaden Ivey when the moment is big. And now I'm sure they'll be tested in big games, and maybe this will develop over the course of the season. They certainly haven't been tested a ton. But right now, when it is a critical possession late, I don't really see Jaden Ivey involved in the half court. And again, that's probably because Travion Williams can be so dominant in the post. Zach Edey certainly can be dominant in the post. But guards win in March. And Jaden Ivey has a legitimate claim to being the best guard in the nation. And yet he's very uninvolved in the half-court offense for this Purdue team at times. I think if I could see that start to manifest itself in the regular season a little bit, might put a little more confidence back in me. But the second thing with Purdue that bugs me, and this might just be a personal thing, guys, but they got too many dudes. And I know that sounds crazy, but like, you guys have played basketball before. You've watched it for years, right? Like, sometimes the team that has a tight 7-man rotation that plays 4 guys 30 minutes that are all future NBA guys, and then just has role players around them, is the perfect rotation. And what I see with Purdue is a team that has a lot of contributors. I think they got 11 guys that can give them good minutes. But I also can see from the outside looking in, what if they get in a tight game in the round of 32 against a chippy opponent that's making some threes, and then all of a sudden at the end of the game, Ethan Morton and Caleb First are on the floor, and Mason Gillis is looking like, when am I getting in the game? Like, there's just a ton of dudes, and you still can't play Edey and Travion together. I guess it's never bad to have dudes, but I kind of wish they would settle on a clear best 5 before we get to the tournament.
It's a great problem to have, though, I think. And I think with a coach like Matt Painter, and I think this team plays well enough together that they can figure it out. Like, look, you rather have this issue than be a Missouri or a Pitt. Okay, like, this is way better than being in that position. So, a coach like Matt
to the Pitt, man, that was so unnecessary, so uncalled for.
I mean, they earned it. It is what it is. I can say that about half the ACC probably, but yeah, they'll figure it out. I think I would bet money that they would figure it out more so than not figure it out. Got time, but March is coming up quick, almost end of January, so it's time to ramp it up and figure those issues out and tighten up.
It's really January 14th. Card. Yeah. It's not even halfway through January, my friend.
And on Kevin Sweeney's timeline, we're 8 years away from March. So we're good.